Waiting for this to let me know it's on. And actually, before we start the study, I have to have like a piece of chocolate. I know this is like the worst thing ever, but like I'm like parched, and I was walking, so. Yep. That did it. That was what I needed. That right there. You can tell that I'm a comfort food person, and I appreciate comfort food in any way, shape, or form. Alright, so. Delicious chocolate. It's like the cure to everything, I think. So, everybody, alright, so we are back. So we're doing our study group time. So this is all about the study group. And we're reading Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. That's the book that we're working on. And so what I do is I pretty much read a passage or a few passages in the book, and then we stop and we discuss and talk about it. And when we're going through this, you can also ask me questions that you would like to ask me about pertaining to the material. Not personal questions. If you stop in and you ask me something about your personal life, or, if you want me to connect with your loved one, that was in the last hour. So this is all the study group time. So we're only doing study group. So only questions pertaining to the topic, the subject matter, or of some sort of spiritual context is what we're going to discuss, or we're going to talk about, okay? So let me get myself set up here. All right. I try to give myself like a piece of chocolate every day because it's good for me, for my mental health. Chocolate every day, totally good for my mental health. Yeah, it's because, we bust our asses and we work really hard as people. A lot of us, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us. And it's one of those things where when you are constantly pushing yourself and driving yourself, you need to enjoy it. You need to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I think that's something that a lot of us are conditioned out of, is enjoying the benefits of your hard work. So everything is about constantly pushing and struggling. And then you don't stop and enjoy what you've created or what you've produced, especially if you've actually created or produced something really great. And so that's something that I've really taught myself over the last 2 or 3 years. It's okay to stop, and it's okay to enjoy what you just did or what you just created. And so I try to honor that like on a regular basis. So every day I try to do something that really is like a treat of some sort. And I'm not talking about treats as far as like candy. Yes, that's treat. But I mean like trying to enjoy just the little things that you can enjoy every day, because you're in this body, you're alive. Why not appreciate, why not enjoy it? Yeah, I'm probably going to have, maybe some sugar issues down the road when I'm older and I am not as strong in my body. But I know people who enjoy and get those, enjoy those little treats and enjoy those little things that mean so much to us. And I know people who, my uncle's a perfect example. My uncle lived into like his late 80s, and every day he lived pretty full life. That doesn't mean that he was like crazy every day and he was like drinking like gallons of beer or this or that, but he did enjoy his life. He enjoyed a lot of it. But he allowed himself to live. And so for me, it's like just having that piece of chocolate and like, it's like a moment worth savoring, even if it's just a moment, like being in like that sheer ecstasy. I know I'm talking about chocolate as being like the best thing ever, but it is for me in some moments when you just did something, you should have a treat. And for me, whenever we go for our walk, it's like an hour walk or a little over an hour hike up and down these steep, like what I think it's like 11 or 12 like stories as far as like how high and low we go. And it's not easy. It's like you have to push yourself. It's like almost 4 miles. But at the end of that, I'm like, I want something to say, hey, I did this. Like I deserve I deserve a medal, or I deserve a gold star. That's my gold star. My little piece of chocolate's my gold star. All right, let's get to it, because I know we're here to discuss spirituality, right? We're here to discuss these spiritual concepts and these ideas and etc. All right, so whenever I speak as Neil, who is the author of the book, Neil Donald Walsh, I will say his name and then I'll read what I'm going to read. And then whenever I'm speaking as God, which is the conversation he's having, who he's having a conversation with in this entire book, I'll say God, and then so forth and so forth, okay? Neil. I know better, but somehow this makes it sound as though we should not mind what others do to us in relationships. They can do anything, and so long as we hold our equilibrium, keep ourselves centered, and all that good stuff. Nothing can touch us, but others do touch us. Their actions do sometimes hurt us. It is when the hurt, and by the way, I'm on page 113, by the way, of the first book. But others do touch us. Their actions do sometimes hurt us. It is when the hurt conies into relationships that I don't know what to do. It's all very well to say, stand aside from it, cause it cause it to mean nothing, but that's easier said than done. I do get hurt by the words and actions of others in relationships. God. The day will come when you will not. That will be the day on which you realize and actualize the true meaning of relationships, the true reason for them. It is because you have forgotten this that you react the way that you do. But that is all right. What is part of the growth? That is part of the growth process. It is part of evolution. It is soul work you are up to in relationship. Yet that is a grand understanding, a grand remembering. Until you remember this, and remember then also how to use relationship as a tool in the creation of self, you must work at the level at which you are, the level of understanding, the level of willingness, the level of remembrance. And so there are things you can do when you react with pain and hurt to what another is being, saying, or doing. The first is, let's see how long, make sure what's going on here. Make sure so I haven't stuff popping up here. And so there are things you can do when you react with pain and hurt to what another is being, saying, or doing. The first is to admit honestly to yourself and to another exactly how you are feeling. This many of you are afraid to do because you think it will make you look bad. Somewhere deep inside of you, you realize that it probably is ridiculous for you to feel that way. It probably is small of you. You are bigger than that. But you can't help it. You still feel that way. There is only one thing you can do. You must honor your feelings. For honoring your feelings means honoring yourself. And you must love your neighbor as you love yourself. How can you ever expect to understand and honor the feelings of another if you cannot honor the feelings within yourself? The first question in any interactive process with another is, now who am I? And who do I want to be in relationship to that? Often you do not remember who you are, and you do not know who you want to be until you try out a few ways of being. That is why honoring your truest feelings is so important. If your first feeling is a negative feeling, simply having the feeling is frequently all that is needed to step away from it. It is when you have the anger, have the upset, have the disgust, have the rage, own the feeling of wanting to hurt back, that you can disown these feelings, these first feelings, as not who you want to be. The master is one who has lived through enough. The master is one who has lived through enough such experiences to know in advance what her final choices are. She does not need to try out anything. She's worn these clothes before and knows they do not fit. They are not her. And since a master's life is devoted to the constant realization of self as one knows oneself to be, such ill-fitting feelings would never be entertained. That is why masters are imperturbable in the face of what others might call calamity. A master blesses calamity, for the master knows that from the seeds of disaster and all experience comes the growth of self. And the master's second life purpose is always growth. For once one has fully self-realized, there is nothing left to do except be more of that. It is at this stage that one moves from soul work to God work. For this is what I am up to. I will assume for the purposes of this discussion that you are still up to soul work. You are still seeking to realize, make real, who you truly are. Life, I will give you bountiful opportunities to celebrate and let me read that again. Life will give you, and it says life and then I in quotations. Life will give you bountiful opportunities to create that. Remember, life is not a process of discovery. Life is a process of creation. You cannot create who you are over and over again. Indeed, you do, every day. As things now stand, you do not always come up with the same answer. However, given an identical outer experience, on day one you may choose to be patient, loving, and kind in relationship to it. One day, too, you may choose to be angry, ugly, and sad. The master is one who always comes up with the same answer, and that answer is always the highest choice. In this, the master is eminently predictable. Conversely, the student is completely unpredictable. One can tell how one is doing on the road to mastery by simply noticing how predictably one makes the highest choice in responding or reacting to any situation. Of course, this throws open the question, what choice is highest? That is a question around which have revolved the philosophies and theologies of man since the beginning of time. If the question truly engages you, you are already on your way to mastery. For it is still true that most people continue to be engaged by another question altogether. Not what is the highest choice, but what is the most profitable, or how can I lose the least? When life is lived from a standpoint of damage control or optimum advantage, the true benefit of life is forfeited. The opportunity is lost. The chance is missed. For a life lived thusly is a life lived from fear, and that life speaks a lie about you. For you are not fear, you are love. Love that needs no protection, love that cannot be lost, yet you will never know this in your experience if you continually answer the second question and not the first. For only a person who thinks there is something to gain or to lose asks the second question. And only a person who sees life in a different way, who sees self as a higher being, who understands that winning or losing is not the test, but only loving or failing to love. Only that person asks the first. He who asks the second question says, I am my body. She who asks the first says, I am my soul. Yea, let all those who have ears to hear listen. For I tell you this, at the critical juncture in all human relationships, there is only one question. Neil, what would love do now? God, no other question is relevant. No other question is meaningful. No other question has any importance to your soul. Now we come upon a very delicate point of interpretation, for this principle of love-sponsored action has been widely misunderstood, and it is this misunderstanding which has led to the resentments and angers of life, which in turn have caused so many to stray from the path. For centuries, you have been taught that love-sponsored action arises out of the choice to be, do, and have whatever produces the highest good for another. Yet I tell you this, the highest choice is that which produces the highest good for you. As with all profound spiritual truths, this statement opens itself to immediate misinterpretation. The mystery clears a bit the moment one decides what is the highest good one could do for oneself. And when the absolute highest choice is made, the mystery dissolves, the circle completes itself, and the highest good for you becomes the highest good for another. It may take lifetimes to understand this, and even more lifetimes to implement, for this truth revolves around an even greater one. What you do for yourself, you do for another. What you do for another, you do for the self. This is because you and the other are one, and this is because there is naught but you. All the masters who have walked your planet have taught this. Verily, verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Yet this has remained for most people merely a grand esoteric truth with little practical application. In fact, it is the most practically applicable esoteric truth of all time. It is important in relationships to remember this truth, for without it, relationships will be very difficult. Let's go back to the practical applications of this wisdom and step away from the purely spiritual, esoteric aspect of it for now. So often, under the old understandings, people well-meaning and well-intentioned, and many very religious, did what they thought would be best for the other person in their relationships. Sadly, all this is produced in many cases. In many cases, was continued abuse by the other, continued mistreatment, continued dysfunction in the relationship. Ultimately, the person trying to do what is right by the other, to be quick to forgive, to show compassion, to continually look past certain problems and behaviors, becomes resentful, angry, and mistrusting even of God. For how can a just God demand such unending suffering, joylessness, and sacrifice, even in the name of love? The answer is God does not. God asks only that you include yourself among those you love. God goes further. God suggests, recommends that you put yourself first. I do this knowing full well that some of you will call this blasphemy, and therefore not my word, and that others of you will do what might be even worse, accept it as my word and misinterpret or distort it to suit your own purposes, to justify ungodly acts. I tell you this, putting yourself first in the highest sense never leads to an ungodly act. If therefore you have caught yourself in an ungodly act as a result of doing what is best for you, the confusion is not in having put yourself first, but rather in misunderstanding what is best for you. Of course, determining what is best for you will require you to also determine what it is you are trying to do. This is an important step that many people ignore. What are you up to? What is your purpose in life? Without answers to these questions, the matter of what is best in any given circumstances will remain a mystery. As a practical matter, again, leaving esoterics aside, if you look to what is best for you in these situations where you are being abused, at the very least, what you will do is to stop the abuse. And that will be good for both you and your abuser. For even an abuser is abused when his abuse is allowed to continue. This is not healing to the abuser, but damaging. For if the abuser finds that his abuse is acceptable, what has he learned? Yet if the abuser finds that his abuse will be accepted no more, what has he been allowed to discover? Therefore, treating others with love does not necessarily mean allowing others to do as they wish. Parents learn this early with children. Adults are not so quick to learn it with other adults, nor nation with nation. We despots cannot be allowed to flourish. Yet despots cannot be allowed to flourish, but must be stopped in their despotism. Love of self and love of the despot demands it. This is the answer to your question. If love is all there is, how can man ever justify war? Sometimes man must go to war to make the grandest statement about who man truly is, he who abhors war. There are times when you may have to give up who you are in order to be who you are. That's a complicated one. There are masters who have taught. You cannot have it all until you are willing to give it all up. Thus, in order to have yourself as a man of peace, you may have to give up the idea of yourself as a man who never goes to war. History has called upon men for such decisions. In the most individual and the most personal relationships, life may more than once call upon you to prove who you are by demonstrating an aspect of who you are not. This is not so difficult to understand if you have lived a few years. Though for the idealistically young, it may seem the ultimate contradiction. In more mature retrospection, it seems more divine dichotomy. This does not mean in human relationships that if you are being hurt, you have to hurt back. Nor does it mean so in relationships between nations. It simply means that to allow another to continually inflict damage may not be the best loving thing to do for yourself or the other. This should put to rest some pacifist theories that highest love requires no forceful response to what you consider evil. The discussion here turns esoteric once more, because no serious exploration of this statement can ignore the word evil and the value judgments it invites. In truth, there is nothing evil, only objective phenomena and experience. Yet your very purpose in life requires you to select from the growing collection of endless phenomena a scattered few which you call evil. For unless you do, you cannot call yourself nor anything else good, and thus cannot know or create yourself. By that which you call evil do you define yourself, and by that which you call good. The biggest evil would therefore be to declare nothing evil at all. You exist in this life in the world of the relative, where one thing can exist only insofar as it relates to another. This is at one and the same time both the function and the purpose of relationship, to provide a field of experience within which you find yourself, define yourself, and if you choose, constantly recreate who you are. Choosing to be God-like does not mean you choose to be a martyr. It certainly does not mean you choose to be a victim. Only your way to mastery, when all possibility of hurt, damage, and loss is eliminated, it would be well to recognize hurt, damage, and loss as part of your experience and decide who you are in relationship to it. Yes, the things that others think, say, or do will sometimes hurt you, unless they do not anymore. What will you get from here to there most quickly is to total honesty. Let me read that again. What will get you from here to there most quickly is total honesty. Being willing to assert, acknowledge, and declare exactly how you feel about a thing. Say your truth, kindly but fully and completely. Live your truth, gently but totally and consistently. Change your truth easily and quickly when your experience brings you new clarity. No one in your right mind, least of all God, would tell you when you are hurt in a relationship to stand aside from it, cause it to mean nothing. Let me read that again. No one in right mind, least of all God, would tell you when you are hurt in a relationship to stand aside from it, cause it to mean nothing. If you are now hurting, it is too late to cause it to mean nothing. Your task now is to decide what it does mean and to demonstrate that. For in so doing, you choose and become who you seek to be. And I'll stop there because that's quite a bit. There was something that I wanted to mention. I think I lost my train of thought earlier. So the idea of holier than thou-ness is what I want to kind of talk about. Because there are a lot of people who have this idea that, and let me turn on this light because it's kind of dark. Perfect. Okay, well. So there are people who have very much holier than thou mindsets, in that they believe it is possible in this lifetime to be an ideal version of any human being ever. That there is the potential to do that. And life is very good at humbling you and reminding you that you're human, which means you don't have the luxury of being ideal in this state. You're going to be human. And even if people think that someone was ideal and they can give me names, I'm not going to agree with it, because you weren't following along with that individual every second of every day. You weren't in that person's mind 24/7 of their lifetime. So you can't claim that about any person. And the only people that are going to essentially share that reality is if this Alexander Woodson, a person on my Facebook page. Good Lord, girl, get a life. So if the only person that can claim that they are in a position where they can essentially say that someone is an ideal is someone who is that person themselves and knows themselves in and out. And so any person, any individual who is truly self-aware and embraces and accepts that level of self-awareness and is going to use every opportunity that was a disadvantage or was painful to go through or suffering to go through. Only people who are very self-aware and to an extent really highly evolved in their energy are going to own whatever comes along with the being human part, with being imperfect. People who put themselves on a stage and act like nothing is wrong with them and everything they do is perfect, those are the ones you have to watch out for, because that in itself is a falsehood. It is not a possibility in this lifetime. So people who like to make this claim or that claim, like, okay, good luck, because there's just no way that that's going to be correct. And so the idea of being an ideal doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to be a good version of yourself or the best version of yourself that you can offer this world. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you're not going to be a ideal for a large percentage of the population or of society or civilization. That's not going to be possible because someone will always find something wrong with you, and you'll always do something that is not acceptable within your community, within your culture, within your civilization. I mean, by default, being born, I was already an imperfect because I was produced out of wedlock. And so because my father was married and my mother was his mistress, I'm by default being born into this state of, well, you're immediately imperfect and you're undeserving or not deserving of a good life or whatever because of that simple, situation that I personally didn't have any control over. And so that's just ridiculous. The mindset, Puritanism, I think is how you say it. Puritanism of like everything has to be pure. Everything has to be pure. I was actually talking to my partner about this yesterday when we were walking, because I was saying, we've gotten to a point in society where we don't understand the value of live and let live. We do not understand that because as people from different walks of life, from different cultural backgrounds, from different mindsets and perspectives and experiences, by default, we should be embracing and accepting a compassionate, a considerate group of people. We should be that because we are having to deal with so many differences of being. But you get this tribalism mindset where people are like, we want to be the best version. We want to be the best. We don't just want to coexist with everybody. We want to be the best. And the only way we can be the best is to destroy everything that isn't us. And there's this warmongering nature that starts to come up within humanity when they start to think that way. If I am not going to live and let live, then I'm going to destroy what is getting in the way of me being the perfect version of myself. And that's when you end up with Hitler and the Nazis. That's when you end up with a lot of, the white radicalism. That's when you end up with a lot of the religious radicalism in different countries. And that's how you end up with a freaking Inquisition and 700 million people being killed over, the last couple of centuries. So you end up with that because you end up with a mindset that I want to be the best and there's no room for weakness or for anything different than that. And I want to be the best amongst those that I feel can grant me that or that are like me. And so then you start to become this radical mindset that there's no room for anyone else to exist. But the simple idea, and for people who have issues with others of minority groups, whatever, for people who have issues with people from other religious groups, the simple moment, the moment that you decide that only you have the right to exist and exist fully, richly, comfortably, the moment you think that way, you've slapped God in the face. You've slapped the universe in the face. You've slapped creation in the face. Because what you have just said is that you've made a mistake with all this crap that I think is garbage. I am the only one of deserving life. And so I am going to go against you by going against creation, by destroying, warmongering, etc., and then go against all of that. And so that, of course, is the opposite of what is embracing of creation, of what is honoring of God. If you want to honor God, honor the creation. Do whatever you can to support, sustain, and respect the creation. Don't make it about you as an individual separate from the creator, because this is what it is. So it's that mixed messaging that people don't understand is a flat out offense against what they think they believe and what they think they are versus what they actually are. And so you have a lot of people who are very confused in this world, who call themselves a thing, but are not a thing, are not the thing. And they don't exemplify it, and they don't show it in their behavior, in their thoughts, in their words. They don't exemplify it. They aren't the thing. And a majority of people who I consider to be, who call themselves Christian, are not Christian. They are people who are by tradition or by conditioning calling themselves Christian, but they don't attend Mass every Sunday. They don't participate in a lot of the consistent practices that are preached through the church and through the organizations. They don't qualify. You don't qualify. And so a lot of people call themselves a thing and are not a thing. And I'm not saying, oh, well, there's something wrong with those people, but own it. You need to own who you really are and stop pretending, stop faking your way through life, trying to fit in with everybody else, because that's not who you are. That's not what you are. I know people who were so devoutly religious, and then as life taught them differently, as experience taught them differently, they stepped away from that. And they're more Christian today because of all the experiences that they went through than when they were like going to church every 2 days and reading the book every single night and trying to preach it. So they're more Christians today than they were back then, when that was all they talked about. Whereas today they hardly mention the word, but yet they act in a much more loving and compassionate way based on the teachings of the master known as Jesus. So I'm going to go through some of your questions here, just to see what you guys are asking about the content or the stuff we're talking about. Let's see. Rena's like, being only in the present moment, that's the way to enjoy a piece of chocolate. Yeah, and I always buy the minis or the baby size, because if I try to do like a king size, I mean, I used to do the king size, but if I do a mini, then I can have a little piece of chocolate like every day, because I do enough physical activity that I'm going to burn it off, etc. But it's not like I'm eating crap food for the rest of the day. It's like my one little pleasure. So ooh, these trolls are in here today. Oh, there's a lot of trolls in here wanting people to pay them money. Okay, so that's all for that slide. I hate when people... It's good stuff. I hate, Cassidy's like, I hate when I meet people who think they have perfected life. They wouldn't be here in the school of life if they were that elevated. Yeah, I think I love that, because that is a huge issue in the spiritual community. The moment someone gets a Buddha and puts it in their yard, they're evolved and they're holier than thou. Or the moment someone goes and attends a yoga class, they're holier than thou. Or and the spiritual community is no different than the religious or the fundamentalist Christian community. There's no difference there, because the mindset is the same. I am better than you, and this makes me better than you. And I don't like her, so she must be evil. Or I don't like him, so he must be possessed by the devil. Or I don't like them, so they must be dark beings or dark energy or negative energy. And so people in the spiritual community, we use every trick in the book to demonize people they don't like for whatever reason. I've had people tell me like, you're this one lady, this one fool, she had... and this was in our neighborhood, because we have a very liberal neighborhood, a very like open people, like talk about all kinds of stuff. And this lady last year or the year before this, she was showing up at events around the neighborhood and basically just like completely going in there and railroading everybody and just spending, like hogging up all the time and the attention, and then talking about herself, how she was amazing and whatever. And she had these beliefs and so forth, beliefs that most people did not appreciate or agree with. But she's also like, all the clouds in the sky that look like spaceships are spaceships, and I'm like, Okay, and here we have a lot of these cloud phenomena where there are very, very interesting looking clouds in the sky that look like they're not like, like they're not clouds, like they're something else. But there is a phenomena that is associated with that. It's a meteorological phenomenon that has existed for a while. But the moment someone sees something and they say, oh, that looks just like a ship, because I'm thinking that it must be true. That is a spaceship. That is the Pleiadians. They're coming and visiting us, and they're coming every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, whatever. And so they go into this is their reality. And so she's one of these people. And she was going online to the next door stuff, and she would just start arguments with people and start to bash people, and people didn't want to approach her. They didn't even want to deal with her, because a lot of people here are very cordial. And I'm from the hood. I'm from Houston hood. And I'm like, I don't have time for this bullshit. So immediately I was just like, sweetheart, just because you think it's a ship doesn't make it a ship. You say it is, but do you actually have any proof or evidence that that's a ship? And have you ever even caught a UFO on film? Or have you ever gotten anything? Because you act like you know all these things, but there's no evidence. You're providing no evidence, and the ends don't justify the means. What you believe doesn't match up to how you operate with these people and how you treat other people. They don't match up. So you're saying this about yourself, but how you're treating everybody is this other way, which is the exact opposite. So which one are you? Because I'm pretty confused, and I don't think that you are really offering up a lot of authenticity and being genuine with everybody. And so she immediately got defensive, and this was like in a public forum on the Nextdoor app, but she immediately got defensive, and then she said, you're evil, and you've been sent here as a representative of Satan, and you don't have, you'll never see UFOs, you'll never see a ship, you'll never do anything because you're so low vibe, and you're the lowest vibe person, and you're what did she say? She says you're dripping with negativity and all this other stuff, and I was like, I am just trying to make you accountable to yourself, because no one seems to feel that they can. And it's kind of ridiculous that you are making all these statements and providing zero evidence and have nothing to back up what you have to say. So why are you doing that? Why are you trying to get all of this attention on yourself? Why are you trying to make everything about yourself? So I was just basically calling her out on her stuff and pretty much acting kind of like a buffer, because everybody else was like, and then all of a sudden when I did that, people start messaging me like, thank you for saying that. We've been dealing with her for years. And I'm like, okay, well, y'all need to say something too, because she's being allowed. She feels entitled. She feels like she can go off and be this way, and no one's holding her accountable to herself. And this is what the book was talking about, that the abuser is also being abused by being allowed to behave this way. And so when you have someone in the neighborhood, or you have someone around you who is acting in a way that is inappropriate or just is not okay, then you call them out on it. And if they want to react or retaliate, by default, you're the evil one. You're the one that's broken. You're the one that's wrong. How many clients have I spoken to where they're in relationships with asses who immediately, when they don't get their way, try to make the person feel like they're the one that's crazy, or they're the one that has a problem, or they're trying to put all their garbage onto them, and completely deflects the responsibility that they had in that situation. So it's an ongoing thing. Of course, like about a month after that whole online thing or whatever, that's when I had my experience in Sedona and caught that UFO in the picture. And I posted it online so everybody could see, hey guys, I did the meditation that we were supposed to do, and I caught something. Here you go. What do y'all think? And so it's funny, because it's like, here, like the meditation might be doing something, because it obviously, here's a picture of something that I don't identify. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you if it's a UFO or an alien craft, but I know it ain't a cloud. I know it ain't a cloud. So it's just one of those things where you kind of like, give me the receipts, show me the proof, show me the evidence. If not, then keep your damn mouth shut, because you're offering nothing of value here, and you're either trying to manipulate the situation to get what you want out of it, or you're simply trying to elevate yourself because you feel that you are better than, because you practice this spirituality, or you think you call yourself this kind of a person or whatever. And people have a tendency of doing that in the spiritual community. It's a huge issue in the spiritual community. That's why I wrote that article about the spiritual community, and how we have a lot of people who call themselves spiritual but act very, very opposite of what they believe, and what they say does not match up to how they react to things in that way. So Because he says, I love that I have had so many hardships in life because it makes me able to relate and help other people going through struggle and deeper level. I don't love that I've been through so many hardships in life. I appreciate them. I don't love them. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do more of it, but if I have to, I will do it. But, all these trolls in the other chat room are ridiculous. Let me go over here. See who's over here on this side here. Yeah. Grace Giselle, good question. Are not ungodly acts still godly? Like still part of God's plan? So, yes and yes and yes and no and yes and yes. So in other words, because this is a complex one, it's like got my brain all wrapped up. Nothing is wasted, right? Nothing is wasted. So in other words, all that exists, all that is produced is used in some way, shape, or form. Nothing is wasted. So creation can never not be creation. So even the ungodly acts are still creations. They're miscreations, meaning that the intent wasn't, the production of that thing was not intentional. It was unintentional. Or it was, in most cases, there are some really crappy people in this world, but in most cases. So even with what is put out there that isn't technically an intentional creation, something will come of it. Right? Something will come of this. So something will be created. Think of it as like a volcano. When a volcano erupts, it completely destroys and decimates the area around it. But as time progresses, it actually is some of the most fertile soil in the world. It's the same thing. Sometimes when there are miscreations, they're not technically mistakes, they're just not intentional, but something will be produced from it. It will create something, and it's almost like I have to come up with a better analogy so I can help you understand this. Think of it this way. Think of creation as a spider web, beautiful, intricate spider web. And let's say the way that the spider web was designed was that it would catch a fly in one particular section or area. It's like designed to do that. And so fly comes and it triggers the web, spider comes along, and something, life is produced from that. But let's say that the fly ends up flying off into a completely different part of the web that it was never intended to kind of fly into. But it still triggers it, and then the spider can still come along and still do something with it. It's the same thing. Like nothing is wasted. Everything's going to get used up. Even the crap that has happened or that is occurring is still going to get used in some way to produce something. Because everything that is produced creates opportunity for more to be produced. So it's never ever an uncreation. It's only a miscreation, not an intentional one, but it's still a creation nonetheless, and it will still produce some sort of opportunity for further creation. And so to come back to this, when we talked about ungodly acts. When you are operating from the perspective of a God, or God, let's put God, because I don't really believe in like many gods, I believe in one God. If you operate from the perspective of a God, what you are doing is you are not identifying as an individual. God does not identify as an individual. That's the one hugest, biggest issue that most religions have problem with God. When they think of God, they think of God as an individual. God is not an individual. God is the whole conscious beingness of all that is, which means it doesn't have anything against anything because it exists for all things. And any time that there is the experience of something against against God, against creation, it's actually an illusion, and it is an illusion that has been created intentionally. So it's like it's there for a reason. So when you are operating from the perspective and the position of God, all that you see before you, whether it is positive, negative, whether it's pain and suffering or love and joy, all of it is a part of you. All of it is a part of what you are, of what you are or what you consume through and made of witnessing. All of it is you. So to have an issue against a person or another, automatically means you're not a God. Because you can't be against it. You can't be against your creation. You are the creation. You are the creator and the creation. And so it's like having an issue against yourself. And so that's where it gets tricky, because what we identify with and what we understand from the perspective of something being evil or something being ungodly or whatever is not a reality. It is a perception of a state of being that causes us such a reaction and such an offense, because it seems so against what we embody in the loving aspect and the loving beingness. It seems like it, but it isn't. In actuality, it is a state of delusion, of self-delusion, and it is created by either the individual or the soul, or the grouping of energy with that. So when you think of God, you love all things. You can't not love the creation. You can't have an opposite. It is all bound, which is why we believe that, because people say, well, why isn't God and everything all evil? And then what you're talking about, the good, is actually like the trick or whatever, is like the thing that is the illusion. Because for all things to operate and to function in collaboration with each other, everything is being collaborated with. Everything, even the things that are not really being, you don't think you're collaborating, there's still collaboration in all of that. Things are happening on a level that is affecting every single thing in this universe and in this reality. In order for you to sustain the creation, there has to be a binding force, and the binding force is love. Now, we understand love as like an emotion, but that is not what true love is. That is the symptom of true love. An authentic, genuine, true love is way beyond our ability to comprehend in this form, but we get a taste of it when we have a little bit of that emotional love, or that sense of bond and connectionness to all things, which we can experience in this lifetime. But it's just a taste, a sampling of it. That isn't necessarily the complete experience of love. But love is what bonds everything together, keeps everything collaborating and working with each other and reacting with each other. Anything based in the opposite, which would be lack, fear, evil, whatever you want to call it, that cannot sustain a creation. That cannot sustain anything, because it is based on the idea of the opposite, and the opposite does not produce a universe, does not produce a reality like this, does not produce any sort of connection and engagement with anything other than an individual. So there's really no way for that to really function from an energetic standpoint. That made sense. I hope I made sense with that one, because that one's a bit complicated to Chriselle, yeah, she's. Do you mind explaining again the bad thing about pacifists and even need for war? If we were in a heavenly state here, and if we were always in a heavenly state, then there would be no need for war. Unfortunately, we are not in a heavenly state. We are in a state of duality. We are in a state of both positive and negative, both sadness and joy, love and pain and suffering or fear. So we are in a state of reality where both of those exist, and there is no way to purify this state with simply love or joy, because the purpose of this reality and this state is to have that dynamic, is to exist as such. And so in this reality, there will always be the protagonist, the individual, the force that is against others, or that is trying to destroy one to gain. There will always be something that operates on that level. And so that could be an individual, that can be a grouping of people, that can be a nation, that can be, other worlds, that can be a whole lot of things. So when you are trying to live in a state of pure peace and love and joy, which I don't believe is possible in this state, but we can get close, but it's not possible to have that ideally. When we are trying to have that, that's fine for the people who choose to have that, but not everybody understands how beneficial that is. Not everybody understands how that could work for them. Not everybody understands, what is to be gained from that. Not everybody understands that. And so there will always be people who have their own way of wanting to handle things and do things. And many times that produces violence, and that produces anger and rage and aggressiveness. That produces these traits, these experiences that humans are capable of having, because we're capable of both. And when you are dealing with something like that, had Hitler been allowed to proceed, he would have sterilized all of Europe, and then he would have come for everybody else. And so you either acknowledge the risk that that kind of situation has on the rest of the world, or you understand, or either you understand it and choose to do nothing and ignore it as if it doesn't exist, or you understand it and you realize you're going to have to do something about it, because this is not something that's going to resolve itself. And you are the awareness of being that is represented in this lighter, more peaceful, more compassionate state. But sometimes you cannot achieve change without having to react in a way that is going to be aggressive or going to be violent. To this, I mean, everything that we do is based on a violent act. All that we do in this form is existent on a violent act. So we are consuming plants, which are living beings, and we cut them. We rip them from their homes. We shred them, and we use them in the most violent of ways. That is a violent act. A living being is being destroyed so that we can consume its essence. We do the same thing with animals. So we kill animals, and in many instances are being tortured in these facilities. And we are taking that and we're eating and consuming the life force to give ourselves sustenance. We do the same thing with each other in instances, but people do it now, and it's more common than not through businesses or through political means, where people consume others so that they can gain from their sustenance. And so there is this obsession. So that is what it is in this form. Unless you want to eat rocks, which also have a consciousness apparently, but unless you want to eat something that doesn't exist, you have to live in this reality. And in order to do so, what you do has to in some way or another is going to include a violent act of some sort. Even just the way that we come into the world with a woman giving birth, and she's being ripped open so that a life can be brought into this world, literally, that is a violent act. So, the idea, in some instances, sexual experiences with people who are consenting adults, sometimes those experiences can become very violent acts as far as how they're doing what they're doing. So violence is a part of this reality. It isn't necessary. We don't have to have violence to exist, but that's what heaven's for. That's why we exist in different forms and in different levels. This is the physical world of duality, and all that exists here, both positive and negative, exists here. And sometimes when the negative or the destructive forces of our human family become dominant, it risks and can affect everyone else. And so there has to be pushback. If there isn't pushback, then it will be allowed to spread like a cancer. Like with any cancer, it will take over, and then it will become the thing that is. And then that cancer will and just by the methodology, they will also, the cancerous mindsets will eat themselves in the process, because and so there's a perpetuation of destruction. So there has to be pushback, and sometimes, unfortunately, in this reality, the pushback is going to include violence. There have been very successful people who have operated from a place of peace and operated from a place of I won't fight back. I'm not going to fight back or do anything. But when you think of all of the Jewish people who were killed during the Holocaust, they didn't really fight back. They just went with it out of fear and out of intimidation. And the ones who could fight back either left the country or they were destroyed in the process, and then the others escaped. And so I wonder what would have happened if you had all of those millions of people fighting and pushing back against just a few thousand or a few, however many Nazis they were. But, I wonder how it would have progressed differently. But they didn't. They allowed them, they went with what was happening, did not fight back as much, and it produced so much destruction in human life. And so it was going to continue because that is what it was. And we didn't even get involved until the very end of it. The United States didn't get involved to the end of it. And we didn't even know that was happening until the end, apparently, supposedly. But yeah, so you can't live in this world without having to participate in some sort of violent act in one way or another, whether it's a minimal one or a massive one, which is taking a life or destroying many lives. That's not an excuse to go and do it, because none of us should do it, but it is part of the reality of this environment, of this world that we live in. Sarah, so I don't know about them stating for you to speak your truth at all times, because sometimes your truth is short-sighted and subjective. I feel it can cause issues that can be prevented by being quiet. I could agree with that in some ways, because I can totally understand and see where you're coming from with that. And for me, how I would perceive that for myself is I surround myself with people who I feel can receive my truth or receive me as I am. I don't surround myself with people who are not able to handle who I am in my most authentic form. And sometimes speaking as I will is my authentic form. Some people can't handle me using curse words. Some people can't handle because I'm flamboyant. Some people can't handle that, but I'm being very open and aware and expressive. Some people can't handle that I'm speaking about masturbation or sex in one study group session, and in another I'm speaking about God. Like, some people can't handle that. Some people can't handle these things. And it says in many instances, and I found this in many instances, it says more about the person who's reacting than it says about the person who is speaking their truth. Because if someone is speaking their truth, they're expressing themselves however they feel they need to express themselves, whether they're right or wrong in that. And I get it, subjectiveness. I get that. They may not be right. They may be incorrect in how they are speaking it, but they have to deal with the consequences of how people will react to them. So that is the other side of it. If people are reacting to them in a way that forces them to assess what they said, they're either going to question whether they were being authentic and they had a right to be that way, or if they actually did not properly understand things and that they were speaking from a place of truth, which was a misunderstanding on their behalf, or in an ignorant way from their behalf. And so that helps people to grow one way or another. So some people, they should keep their mouth shut because they don't know well enough to be able to participate or to be able to speak on something. But that doesn't mean they don't have the right to. They have the right to. They have the right to speak their truth. And actually, because of 2020, we're all very aware of issues and of challenges that we are facing as a civilization and as a culture in this, not just in this country, but in this world. And we're more aware now today than we were 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And we don't have the luxury of ignoring it. We don't have the luxury of trying to pretend it doesn't exist. We don't have the luxury of that, because at the end of the day, we are on a planet with billions of people, and we have to learn to live with each other. And if we can't learn to live with each other, we will destroy each other in the process. And so I'm all about live and let live, but I'm also about, that's the position I take. I'm going to stand in between the person who doesn't believe that, and I'm going to support the person who does. And so the person who believes it is going to be better to sustain and support in a world of compassion and consideration. The person who doesn't believe that is a threat to everybody else who does. And so they either have to be limited in their capacity to participate, or they, in some instances, they become violent and start to kill people, have to be stopped in a violent way. It's not fun and it's not easy. And I totally got on a totally different topic. But to come back to this, I spent a majority of my life being quiet and not speaking things that I felt needed to be spoken. And there are times when I spoke up or I said something that I didn't really appreciate or enjoy the repercussions of that. Since I've gotten a lot more unfiltered, and especially in the last year and a half, I must say that most often people benefit from my tenacity and my lack of tact. You can call it lack of tact. I call it a lack of restraint sometimes in what I say to people. I never intend to hurt people. I never intend to take or disempower anyone. I never intend for that. And if people who truly know me are going to know that I don't mean for that and I never intend for that. But if I ever do misspeak or if I ever speak in a way that is destructive, I'm going to own that because I've done it several times in front of the camera. So I'm going to own it and I'm going to just, okay, I'm being destructive. I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. And this is what I would do instead. But that's a better example than holding back and not saying anything and it never getting resolved. And so I understand both sides of it and I totally get it. I still believe that it's important that we be honest with each other, that we feel safe enough to be honest with each other. Because at least I would rather know the crap that my neighbor thinks from an authentic perspective than to not know and then to operate and to not have... I think it would not help me to have a neighbor if the neighbor was not honest and direct and they instead, kept everything to themselves, but things are happening around and I don't know about and I'm not aware of the situation. Like, I don't like things happening when I'm not able to be a part of it and like possibly change the outcome. But to go back to this, I think that, speaking our truth is important. Yeah, I think that's conditioning. I think that's that whole Puritan mindset, Sarah, that, coming to this country, all those Puritans came over and they're like, we want to be the perfect race of people. So let's kill all the Indians or let's kill our neighbors or let's damn everybody or let's, put scarlet letters on people's foreheads. Like this is the mindset. And so people are very, very backwards in the way that they approach things strategy wise, because what they believe and what they do don't always match up. And I think a lot of people use the excuse that they're doing it in the name of God or they're doing it in the name of a faith to act the way that they do and think that they can get away with it. And they can't get away with it because that is unacceptable behavior. And they are showing themselves to be who they truly are and authentically are. There are a lot of people that have left a lot of these Christian organizations, especially in the South, they've lost a lot of members and congregation members because they saw how they reacted in instances where the church should have been the place that brought hope. The church should have been the place that offered people a place to stay because they had no place to stay. The church should have been the first in line to try to help people to be better at avoiding becoming infected by COVID. Like the church could have leveled up and done a lot of things in the benefit of people, and it didn't in many instances. Not all churches, but churches. And so people left the faith because they just could not live with the hypocrisy. But sometimes you need hypocrisy. You need people being their authentic selves to see who they are. And I would rather know who they are than to buy into something for a long period of time and then think that that is what it is when it's actually not that at all. So. It is all about perspective. Fear is a human experience that will never leave you in this lifetime. You can become friends with fear, meaning that when you recognize the sense of fear, instead of reacting from a place of I'm about to be destroyed, I have to get away or escape, you can understand that it is an emotion and then see if you need to do anything besides having the fear. Because if you just react in fear, then everything you're doing is unintentional at that point. You're just reacting. But if you're aware of the fear and you understand it, then depending on the situation, you might be able to do something constructive with it. For example, I remember once I was at my cousin's house and I had just dyed her hair because I was always the person in the family that dyed everybody's hair. And so I had just finished dyeing her hair. We were waiting for the 45-minute timer to be done. And while we were waiting, my cousin, her daughter, my niece, she was playing with a little metal chair, and she slipped and fell and slipped on the chair, and it sliced her finger. She was 2-3 years old, little girl. So it sliced her finger and she was bleeding. And so immediately I recognized that. And right away I ran to the bathroom because I was like, oh crap, there's blood. I have to stop the bleeding. So I immediately reacted and ran to the bathroom and grabbed whatever I could and then came back and started to wrap her finger up. And my cousin was freaking out and she was like, oh my God, she was freaking out. that she like lost it. And she was just like, she was hysterical because her baby was bleeding. And so I immediately was like, we need to take her to the hospital, go wash your hair out because your hair is going to fall out. And you guys, I said, they might be able to attach her finger, but your hair ain't coming back. So go wash your hair. We'll go to the hospital. And so she rinsed her hair out as best as she could. And then she, came with a towel or whatever. And I got the baby and I wrapped her finger up. And then we jumped into her car. I was in the back seat with the baby holding her and just trying to keep her calm. And she actually got calm. She settled down because she was freaking out too and screaming. But once we were driving and stuff, she started to calm down because I wasn't freaking out and I was just holding her and I was comforting her. My cousin was freaking out. My cousin was like, when she stopped at the light, she was like freaking out and she was like breaking down. And I said, Monica, I need you to stay calm because she is picking up on our energy. And right now, she doesn't know how serious this is. We don't either. So I need you to calm down and just take deep breaths and just be chill because we're going to get to the hospital. She's okay. She's not freaking out anymore and she will get this fixed. So just breathe, calm down and focus on driving. We need you to focus on driving. And so she calmed down and we got there. And then once we got there, they saw the baby right away. And then my cousin was able to be in the back room with the baby and while they were patching up her finger. And so she had her finger in a little cast and everything for a while, but she's fine. She's okay. She still has her finger, but my cousin, the fear was overwhelming. The fear of I'm a horrible mother, the fear of I neglected my child, the fear of I'm doing one thing for myself right now, which is to dye my hair. And it costs me, screwing up in life, which is something that we really struggle with a lot, is if I do something good for myself, there's a punishment or the other shoe's going to drop. And so there was all these emotions that were associated with that. And all these emotions of I'm going to lose my baby or I'm going to screw her up for the rest of her life. All that fear was there. And so in giving into that fear, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe they would have called an ambulance. I don't know how they would have reacted. But in me understanding, okay, this is a crazy ass situation. What do I need to do to get this under control or to help reduce the suffering and to improve the likelihood that this is going to work out? And so that's where my mind went. And which is funny because I'm a very emotional person. I cannot deal with people suffering and watching movies and stuff that's violent. I can't deal with that. But in this situation, in real life, I can see blood. I can see all these things. But that's what you do with fear. You try to understand that it's just a human emotion. You're having it in the moment. But what do you need to do to resolve this or to get this under control? Because at the end of the day, that will get rid of your fear. That will help you to reduce what you're feeling from a fear standpoint. And I'm going to how would you encourage someone to follow their spiritual intuition? Understanding is the first part of it. Understanding that it's not a religious issue. Intuition, psychic ability is not a religious thing. It's not a religious thing, and to some extent, it's not even a spiritual thing. It is a human ability that we all possess. So intuition is something that we all possess that comes to us from back when we were, cavemen and cavewomen, and we had to understand danger to survive. And so animals have very good intuition because they sense it in a different way and they pay attention to it, and so they react to it. So we don't. We're taught to think about everything or think through everything. And sometimes thinking through something may not be the best approach. Sometimes you have to go with your gut. You have to go with that inner knowing or that inner feeling, even if it doesn't make sense. Last year, many things that I didn't make sense to me until things happened. And then I was like, now I know why I did that. Now I know I was acting that way. But understanding it is a great way to do it. And you can, and if they want to know, go to my website. You go down to the classes and events thing. There is a free psychic class there. It teaches you how to understand it. There's no charge. It's completely free. I spent a year putting it together. So it is there to help you understand all of your psychic abilities. Intuition being one of them, but not necessarily. Intuition's the weakest or the most subtle of all abilities. But it is there and we all can tap into it and use it. Okay. All right, guys, I think I'm done because I'm out of time. I love you all. I will be back next Wednesday.